questions?
Oh, most definitely,
discussions?
yes. Yes.
In your lecture tonight?
Yes.
All right, that's tonight at the University of Washington. And I also should note that this book, though we're speaking in sometimes heated terms with Dr. Dawkins and with callers about some of his arguments in this book and others, this book is illustrated with a series of handsome full-color plates helping to lay out what he describes as the evidence for evolution. Let's go to Jack in San Antonio, Texas. You're on the Medved Show.
Hello, Mr. Dawkins.
Hello.
I've been reading there's some new evidence that shows that we might not be related to the Neanderthal or Homo erectus species, to which some paleoanthropologists are now saying it must be that we evolved following a different path from some earlier species like that Homo habilis. If this turns out to be true, and without any intermittent remains to show a gradual change, will true believers in evolution be forced to claim that in a relatively short period of time, Homo habilis somehow went into an extremely fast form of evolution, a sort of turbo evolution to produce the first humans, that so-called mitochondrial Eve that appeared in Ethiopia near the Red Sea?
I'm not familiar with the research that you're talking about. It wouldn't be that dramatic, actually, because if you look at all those fossils, whether Homo habilis, Homo erectus, or Neanderthal, they're all pretty much the same. And so if what you're suggesting is that Homo erectus is not our direct ancestor, which is normally considered to be, but if Homo erectus is not, and if we're descended from Homo habilis by a different route, then that would not be too dramatic a finding. It would be all of a piece with other minor upsets that have occurred in the history of biology. So it would be very interesting, but it wouldn't be a major revolutionary finding.
Let's go to Andrew in Minneapolis. You're on the Michael Medved Show with Richard Dawkins.
Thank you. I just have a question, Mr. Dawkins. What I'm not understanding is your process of thinking. You made the comment about, the issue of the Holocaust, and people who deny it you immediately slide into it's malicious and anti-Semitic, which I must first say that the Jews of Europe are not Semites. Hebrew Arabic is not their primary language, but regardless, how do you go from your study and your experience and then say that this issue is off limits, you cannot question it? And then if people who do question it, you label them with basically a moral failure on their part.
We have a Holocaust denier on our hands, do we here?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, okay. I don't wish to argue about that. It's not the subject of my book. It was simply an analogy that I was making. It's a very small part of the book. I could argue about Holocaust denial, but I don't think you'll find many people on your side, and I don't really think I want to talk about it.
I appreciate your response, Professor Dawkins. Let's go to Jason, Taylorville, Illinois. You're on the Michael Medved Show with Richard Dawkins, who is not a Holocaust denier.
Yeah, thanks. I just was going to ask Richard, I believe in creationism, and I do that out of faith, which is, I feel like it might enrich my life. I want to know why he cares, why he dedicated his life to changing my mind.
And that's by the way, Jason, that's a fascinating and it seems to me important question.
Are you suggesting to me that you allow what makes you feel good, what enriches your life, to govern what you think is true about the real world?
Well, you define faith to me.
Faith is belief in something without evidence.
Okay, why do you have a problem if believing in a creator makes me live a more enriched, fulfilling life? The evidence is overwhelming.
What I have a problem with, I don't mind how you get an enriched and fulfilled life. What I do have a problem with is if you go from there to saying that X gives me a fulfilled and enriched life, therefore what X says about the world is true. If say, a belief in fairies gave you an enriched and fulfilled life, you'd be welcome to have that enriched and fulfilled life, but that would not make fairies exist.
But historically, belief in God has worked somewhat better than belief in fairies.
Nevertheless.
And if you apply Darwinian principles about natural selection, why haven't religious impulses been selected out? We'll get to that and more with Richard Dawkins. 44 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show. Let me follow up with Richard Dawkins, the author of The Greatest Show on Earth. In this book and in previous books, you acknowledge that evolution doesn't stop. It's a continuous process, right? I mean, you're nodding. Yes, you're
Sorry,
nodding.
I must remember it's radio.
Right. Oh, sure. But if evolution is a continuous process, then once we developed as Homo sapiens and the current man in its current form was here, it hasn't stopped. We've continued to evolve. Wouldn't you think that, given your negative view of religious faith, your negative view of people who believe in fairies or believe in things that simply aren't true, that through evolutionary pressure there would be natural selection operating to greatly reduce the number of people who have deep, abiding, life-changing, and to us, life-enhancing religious faith? Shouldn't that be a trait in humankind that is selected out by the Darwinian process?
Remember that Darwinian selection is not necessarily producing what any one person would regard with a value judgment as of high value. What natural selection favors is the ability to reproduce. And in order for something to be favored by natural selection, what that actually means on the ground is that individuals who have that quality have more children than individuals who don't. So to say that religious belief, for example, has a selective advantage simply means religious people would have more children than non-religious people.
And would survive long enough to have children, and more of those children
would survive long enough to have children. But nowadays, since surviving long enough to have children is pretty easy, few people die young in civilized societies anyway. That means that having children itself is the main thing. So if there is a genetic component, which there probably isn't, but if there is a genetic component to either religious belief and or tendency to want to have lots of children or tendency to have lots of children, then we do indeed have a possible positive selection pressure in favor of whatever it takes to make people want to have children. So if a certain religious belief makes you have larger families, for example, then there would be selective advantage in that. But that's all it would mean. It doesn't have to mean goodness in any other